Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Natalie Barnett, and I am the VP of Clinical Research here at Nanit. And I'm joined today by Professor Sarah Berger, who is a developmental psychologist from the City University of New York, who has worked very closely with us at Nanit for the last 6 years or so. And so I wanted to welcome everyone to our June Parent Like a Pro Summit. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about we're going to be talking about sleep and development for babies, kind of around that sort of 4 to 12-month period. And on the screen, you will see a poll. I would love everyone to take that poll if you can. And it is our Nanit community's 3rd birthday, and we're celebrating with a series of free virtual parenting events. And today we are lucky enough to have Professor Berger joining us. And as a little reward for you, one of you will be winning a sound and light machine. So stay until the end for the winner to be announced. And then also everyone who is joining, or actually everyone who registered for the event today, is going to be entered to win the grand prize at the end of this week, which is $500 to spend at nanit.com. So without any further ado, I think we can get started. So Professor Berger has studied sleep and development for many decades now, and we've worked very closely with Sarah over the years, and it's really has been a pleasure to sort of get to know her work and work together. And so we're so thrilled that she could join us today to help all of you sort of understand a little bit about the impact of development on sleep, and how sleep changes, over that first year. So we're going to take the first 20 minutes or so to talk a little bit about sleep and routines, and and nap transitions and a few other things, and then after that first 20 minutes, we're going to transition to answering your questions. So I will sort of jump in and talk a little bit about some recent research that we have done out of Nanit Lab. And one of the things that we have been seeing fairly consistently relates to bedtime variability. And so bedtime variability is how regular the bedtime is, how regularly you're putting your baby to bed at the same time each night. And so we see that babies with a low bedtime variability, or babies who are put to bed at around the same time each night, regardless of when that is, actually sleep better and longer than the babies who have a higher bedtime variability, or for babies whose bedtime varies a lot, from night to night over the week. And so it really and there's a lot of research out there showing that consistency when it comes to babies and routines and schedules really is incredibly important, and really helps their sleep development, and also can help their learning and development as well, which Dr. Berger will talk to. And I just wanted to put in a little plug now for our updated sleep schedule generator, and I know someone will possibly put it into the chat. We have just updated the Nanit sleep schedule generator, so you can, for free, download a customized sleep schedule, or sleep routine, or a sleep sort of daytime sleep schedule for your babies, depending on a whole variety of different questions that you ask. So there's no sort of one size fits all when it comes to schedules. Your schedule should be as unique as your baby. But that said, we know that a lot of families want a little bit of guidance and help when developing their daytime schedule. And so we develop these schedules so that we can really help parents sort of navigate that time where they want to have a little more consistency throughout the day, which usually means a little more consistency at nighttime. We know that your babies need, a certain number of calories, throughout a 24-hour period. And we want to sort of, gently, gradually, naturally have those, calories during the day so that they can then sort of gradually, naturally start to cut out those calories at nighttime. And so as we think about, creating schedules for our babies, it's important to make sure that they're getting the right amount of food at the right time and also getting the right amount of sleep throughout the day as well. So we want to make sure that they're setting themselves up for success so that they're getting everything that they need during the day, which is really going to help them to be sleeping better at nighttime. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. And I wanted to ask Dr. Berger a little bit about her research and tell us a little bit about, tell us, Sarah, tell us about your research around sleep and how it relates to learning.
Sure. So I look at the relationship between sleep and learning in both directions. So, how sleep affects babies' learning, but also how when babies learn new skills, it can affect their sleep. So, we'll start with sleep affecting learning.
Okay.
So, I have a few studies showing that that a well-timed nap, so napping shortly after learning something new, and the way we study that is teaching babies how to solve a novel problem.
Mhm.
From the baby's point of view, we're playing a game,
Yep.
and some of the babies nap afterwards. Some of them stay awake during the delay, and then we test them again, and we play the game with them again. And the babies who have napped um, seem to learn more quickly how to solve that problem. And we've also done a version where the babies play this game again the next day after a night's sleep.
Mhm.
And even after a night's sleep, the babies who didn't nap don't catch up. So there's something special
Mhm.
about the nap
Yep.
that is facilitating babies learning this new information. So I like that it fits well with your discussion of a routine. So if we know that we're going to build a nap into our regular daily routine, then it's just better, just in general, for all of the learning that babies have to do. Um, One other study, sort of related, is was about quality of sleep at night,
Mhm.
and we found that that the more um, consistent night sleep, the more the easier it was, the better prepared babies were the next morning for learning, and the same game that we played before.
Right.
So
And
um,
Sarah, how old were these babies that you studied?
in these particular studies, these babies were new walkers, so they
Okay.
ranged from um, probably 11 to 14
Mhm.
months. We are in the middle of a study with younger babies, 6 to 8 months,
Yeah.
to see if that same pattern is true. And we're almost finished with the study, but we have some preliminary numbers that looks like that pattern of night sleep predicting readiness to learn the next day looks the same for the younger babies as it did for the older babies.
Amazing, amazing. And so can you tell us also about you said that you were going to focus first on how sleep impacts learning. Can you tell us a little bit about how learning impacts sleep?
Yes, absolutely. Um, So I look at the relationship between learning new motor skills.
Mhm.
So when babies learn to crawl, pull up to a stand, walk, and how that impacts their sleep. And we've known for quite a while that when babies are learning these new motor skills, then their sleep can be disrupted at night. They wake up more at night. Um, and but we didn't really know exactly why those two things should be related. What did sleep have to do with learning a new motor skill? So one fantastic thing about Nanit is that we have a camera in the crib. And so we actually, when parents agree to participate in this study, we look at their sleep around the nights that they're learning these new skills. And we're seeing that they're moving more in the crib, just around, taking up more space in the crib, traveling around the crib more. And they're also almost, I'm using this term figuratively, but it's almost like they're practicing their new skills in the crib. So they're getting into poses and postures that might be related to their new skills. So if they're
Amazing.
learning to crawl, they might be moving their arms and legs more when
Mhm.
they wake at night.
Yep. Great. And people might often call that a sleep regression, Sarah. And I think, you and I have talked many times about sort of really trying to reframe that term and that discussion to
Yes.
really think more of it as a sleep disruption rather than a sleep regression. These babies are not going backwards, they're very much going forwards, right?
Yeah.
They're learning these new things. It can cause a sleep disruption. But for parents, it can feel like a quote unquote regression because they may not be sleeping as well as they were previously. But I don't want parents to think that their babies are going backwards. They're really not going backwards, are they?
Right, right. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes, it's a misnomer. It's really not a good label for what's
Yep.
happening. It's a really good sign that they're actively processing this new information, and there are a few theories still out there about why it makes them wake up more. So we know that they're processing information in sleep, um, and so I could speculate about why that is, but it's sleep is playing a role in
Yep.
processing this new information. And so the more they're waking up, I think it's a good sign that they're learning a lot and they're working really hard to gain all of these skills.
Exactly. And as hard as that can be for parents to be going through, knowing that this is sort of a short-term thing that, we see, and you've seen this, that sort of fairly quickly after they have reached that milestone, or if they have mastered a milestone, their sleep tends to go back to normal,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, it's definitely. We some of the latest numbers that we were looking at were about 2 weeks on either
Mhm.
side of the onset of a skill. And we can see it's almost like getting a little preview that actually might start waking up more before they reach the skill.
Mhm.
So it's like a little like heads up, mom, like something's coming.
Yep.
But then very soon after they demonstrate that skill, it seems like they're going back to sleeping
Interesting.
well again.
Interesting. But also, too, we do know that this is sort of a classic time for parents to be getting off track if they're, responding differently during the night or, perhaps getting into habits that they weren't, doing before. And so I think it's really nice for parents to sort of understand that, look, just write it out. This should only last for a few days or a week. And your baby should be, sleeping back to normal fairly quickly,
Mhm.
but that can be hard to live through. And I totally get that and remember it very well with my
I
three.
remember it well.
Uh,
Yes.
but know that it's not, I really don't want people to be thinking that parents have done anything wrong. If their baby is waking up more during the night, it's not because, you have done something wrong. It could well
Mhm.
be that they are about to reach a milestone. And I think if parents can sort of understand that and know that all of these motor milestones and it could be some verbal milestones as well, that all of these milestones can have an impact on sleep,
Yeah.
so which I think is
I think it's
really
reassuring to
for
know
sure.
that.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure. One thing I did want to touch on a little bit is um, thinking about nap transitions. And I know particularly for this age group, if we're thinking primarily that people who are on have got are expecting or have babies who are in that sort of 4 to 12 month range, over that first year of life, babies really do, they can, their sleep is consolidated over that year, and their naps become more consolidated over that year as well. And so fairly typically, or most often, somewhere around 5 to 7 months, we see that babies often transition from 3 naps down to 2. And a sign that a baby is getting ready to transition from 3 naps down to 2 could be that, for example, for their second nap, that they take longer to fall asleep, or they're just not ready to go to bed when you would normally put them down, or that you're always having to wake them at the end of that nap if they're really starting to want to sleep longer for that second nap. You may also see some resistance to their third nap. It could be that they're not tired going into the crib, or they're taking a long time to fall asleep for that nap. So those two things, it could be one or a combination of those things, that you may see that they're ready to transition to 2 naps. I typically don't recommend that you would transition to 2 naps until you're well established on 3 meals a day of solids, because I find that having a really good lunch before going down for that second nap can really help lengthen that second nap. And when a baby has had a long second nap, it means that it means that they can have that sort of longer wake window, for that last stretch of the day, to get them through until that, they're, 7:30 bedtime. So that would be the only thing that I would sort of caution on that transition from 3 naps down to 2. And then when we think about, um, as and they're typically on 2 naps for kind of a really nice length of time. It might be 4 months, it might be 6 months, it might be even a little longer. And so, but somewhere between 12 and 18 months, it's a broader range. Sometimes it's a little earlier, sometimes it's a little later, but it's generally in that range. Sort of on average is about 14 or 15 months. You will start to see signs that they're ready to transition from 2 naps down to 1. That can be a little more tricky transition. And so you need to sort of watch the timing of the naps. And to Sarah's point, timing really can become really important when they're, really starting to learn all of these things during the day. And so if we're thinking about things to look out for when they're transitioning from 2 naps down to 1, I would look for their first nap is getting a little bit later, or they're just not tired going down for that first nap, or they're sleeping a really long time for that first nap, and it's harder to get them down for the second nap. And so what we would generally recommend would be perhaps shortening each of the naps, so that you're still able to have a long enough wake window between the 2 naps that they're going to be tired enough to go down for the second nap. And so if you wanted to have a look at our sleep schedule generator, you can see what that might look like for, a baby who is taking, 2 naps, at 13 or 14 months. And then as they transition to 1 nap, you'll have this sort of one longer nap, but it's probably going to be a little bit earlier in the day. And then over time, they will then have this sort of one longer nap, typically in the middle of the day. And that 1 nap can really last a long time. And when babies drop that nap varies tremendously. Some babies will drop it, at before age 2, others won't drop it until after age 4. So there's such a huge range in what is normal for, keeping that nap or dropping that nap. But they're the sort of typical nap transitions that we're going to see over that, that first year or 18 months. Now, Sarah, one other thing that I wanted to ask you, and I know this is a little out of your wheelhouse, but it still goes towards, um, you know, uh, still goes towards, what we've been talking about. Do you have any advice or general advice on starting solids?
Right. So I think about this in terms of infants' motor skills. So that's what I'm interested. I talked earlier about their locomotor skills, learning to
Yep.
crawl and walk, but I am interested in general. And so one piece of advice is if um, if the baby seems ready and able to reach
Mhm.
for the
Yep.
food and is showing interest, and they can pick it up and explore and play with it
Yep.
on their own, that's a sign that they're ready, that they, that they're initiating
Yep.
on their own. Um, and also, giving them practice, this will come a little bit later, but giving them practice with spoons.
Mhm.
They won't be good at it right
Yep.
away, but just allowing them to bang it on the tray of the high chair and put it in their mouth, and you talk through, like, we're gonna put the food on the
Yeah.
put the food, let's eat some food. Here's your spoon. So yeah, so I think about it in from that perspective of
Yeah.
being physically ready to do it.
Yeah. No, I love that. And there's just a question in the chat about someone's son doesn't have teeth yet. Babies don't need teeth to start solids, so I wouldn't, a lot of kids don't get teeth till, much, much later. So I
Mhm,
wouldn't use, whether they have teeth as a sign that
mhm,
they're ready for solids. But and I really love those two things that you mentioned. And I think it's really also important to mention that we really recommend, talking to your pediatrician about when they think it's the right time to start solids. Your pediatrician knows your baby, and will be able to give you some really, really good guidance around the right time, because there will be some pediatricians who recommend starting solids, 4 months, others recommend it closer to 6 months. So I would definitely follow the guidance of your pediatrician. But I really love your idea, Sarah, of giving them practice during meal times. It may mean that you're also, feeding them. They're not going to be capable of getting all of the calories from those solid feed that solid food themselves. They're going to need some help. Similarly, at 3 months, they're not going to be able to hold a bottle by themselves and get all of the milk that they need, and you need to help them with that. And I see solids as a similar thing, where teaching them to how to how to eat, how to use utensils, but they still need help and guidance from us. So I think it's really important for parents to understand that they may need to be still, popping that food in their child's mouth, even whilst giving them, things to play with on the high chair, which I think is great. Um, and the other thing about the sleep schedule generator that I just wanted to mention was that we designed it specifically because so that you're not ramping up solids too quickly or cutting back the milk too quickly, because we want to make sure, because at the beginning when they're starting solids, the solids really are just sort of a supplement. We don't want the solids to be replacing the milk. As they get a little bit older, the solids will start to replace the milk. But we want to make sure that we're giving them the right amount of milk and the right amount of solids at the right time, so that they're hungry for each of those things at the right time. So, is there anything else you wanted to mention about solids, or even other milestones?
I think that's all about
Okay.
solids. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. Um, okay. So we're at the point now where we could think about answering some questions that are in the chat. Um, oh, and this is a good one, and I'm happy for you to tackle it, or I'm happy to tackle it as well. How do you transition from nursing to sleep to fully awake for feeds? So, any advice on baby-led weaning versus purees? Oh, we kind of touched on that a little bit, but let me tackle the first one. So, look, I think I would say this: if your baby is falling asleep at the breast and sleeping all the way through the night, I think there is no need for you to change anything. I think it's amazing if they're able to do that. Most babies cannot do that. Most babies, we have to think about what a baby needs to fall asleep at the beginning of the night is going to be what they need to get themselves back to sleep when they wake up during the night. So if that is a breast, if that is being held, if that is being rocked, if that is a pacifier, they're going to need that when they wake up in the middle of the night. And look, in those early months, we know that most babies are not capable of self-soothing, and you need to be the one soothing them. So you will rock, you will pat, you'll hold, you will feed, you will do all of those things. As your baby gets a little bit older, if your baby is 6 months or 7 months, we know that your baby is capable of self-soothing if they're given the opportunity. And we also know, all of the research shows us, that babies who are able to fall asleep by themselves at the beginning of the night sleep better, sleep longer, are happier, their parents are happier than the babies who require a lot of assistance to get back to sleep in the middle of the night. So if your baby is falling asleep at the breast and the only way they know how to get back to sleep is by being breastfed in the middle of the night, they're waking up and they're frustrated. They need something that they can't get. And we don't want your baby to be frustrated. We want them to have everything in that crib space that they need to be able to just get themselves back to sleep. And the easiest way for us to do that is give them the opportunity to fall asleep by themselves at the beginning of the night. So, and that can look, and so once they can do that, it's much easier for them to fall back to sleep when they wake up during the night. So if your baby is falling asleep at the breast and is waking up multiple times during the night, and the only way they can get back to sleep is with a breastfeed, and they're old enough where you're ready to cut down, you think they're ready to cut down on those breastfeeds, I would start by thinking about having them fall asleep by themselves at the beginning of the night in the crib. So the thing that I actually love to recommend is doing a bottle for that last feed. It doesn't necessarily mean that the entire feed is a bottle. It could be that perhaps you do the last breastfeed of the day, before the bath, and then you top off with a couple of ounces from a bottle. But that bottle just becomes far less of a sleep association, and it seems to be much easier to keep a baby awake at the bottle and have them make it easier for them to fall asleep in the crib. The other thing that I would recommend is having that bedtime routine in the living room rather than in a dark bedroom rocking back and forth. That rocking back and forth is doing the work for them, and we want them to be doing the work for themselves. So if we can have that last feed of the day, even if it's just a top off of 2 ounces from a bottle in the living room, lights on, and then move into the nursery or into your bedroom, wherever they sleep, and giving them the chance to fall asleep by themselves at the beginning of the night would be what I would try and start with if you can. Okay, so Sarah, have you got anything to add to that?
No, that was great. Yes, covered it.
Okay. All right, this is a good one. What should we do when babies wake up in the middle of the night? My baby likes a pacifier, so I like to help pop it back in her mouth, but is there something else that I should do instead? Do you want to take that one, or do you want me to take that one?
You go.
Happy to take that. Right. So similar to the breasts at the beginning of the night, if your baby needs that pacifier to fall asleep at the beginning of the night, they're going to need it when they wake up during the night. So if your baby is capable of getting that pacifier by themselves, have at it. Let them get that pacifier by themselves and put it back in their mouth. If they're not capable of getting it by themselves, you have a couple of options. One, you can go in every night 17 times and put that pacifier back in, or we could think about getting rid of the pacifier. So, or you can have maybe 5 pacifiers in a corner so that they know where they are, and you show the baby. You can maybe even try and teach the baby how to get it into their mouth. That can be really hard to do for a 6-month-old or a 7-month-old or an 8-month-old. It's really when babies are a lot older that they're capable of putting that pacifier in their mouth. I honestly, my preference would be just to get rid of the pacifier at this stage. But it's the fastest and easiest thing to do. It's going to eliminate your baby's frustration, and it's going to eliminate your frustration. It's going to take a couple of days, and you should be done with it. But I don't know how old your baby is, but if your baby's capable of getting it for themselves. I think leave a few, like 5 in a corner, show them where they are, and give them the chance to get them back in themselves, rather than you having to be disturbed to go in and get them. Otherwise, let's just get rid of them altogether. Oh yeah, this is okay. This can be really, really tricky, but I'm going to tackle it. How to transition from contact sleeping to independent sleep. My 5-month-old will go down and then wake up within 15 to 30 minutes and will not stay asleep unless on me. And look, Emily, I know that this is really, really hard. And as you know, as a newborn, you know, a lot of babies just love, sleeping on their parents, and it can be amazing for parents and babies to be doing those contact naps. But at this age, we know that your baby is capable of falling asleep by themselves and then getting themselves back to sleep when they wake up. So I would love you to try having them fall asleep in the crib by themselves at the beginning of the night. And once they can do that, it's going to be much easier for them to go the longer than 15 or 30 minutes, because it sounds like they have this very strong sleep association with contact napping and sleeping on you. And at this age, this is the age where we really want to think about creating healthy sleep habits that can last. And so honestly, this is the time to try it. This is the time to have them practice falling asleep by themselves at the beginning of the night. And like any skill, it takes time and it takes practice. So, don't think that you have failed or your baby has failed if it takes a few days or even a couple of weeks for them to practice how to learn how to fall asleep. But I know that they can do it. So I would encourage you to give them the opportunity to do that.
There's a question in the Q&A that not
Yes.
in the chat that
Okay.
I think, that asks about the advantages and disadvantages of sleep training.
Great.
And so it just goes to one of the things you were talking about before about self-soothing, about that being such a valuable skill, because it not only will help them fall asleep, but it's just useful in general, aside from sleep, being able to self-regulate. So
Yep.
that's certainly one of the advantages of babies being able to fall asleep on their own.
Yep, I love it. And also too, I just wanted to mention there that when we talk about sleep training, we don't necessarily just mean one method of sleep training. There are lots of different methods of sleep training. They all work to various degrees. But I want families to choose a sleep training method that works for them, that they know that they can commit to for a week or two and stick with it, because it might take, a week or two for their babies to learn how to fall asleep and how to stay asleep. So I really want to encourage you to choose the right method for you, and know that you are not going to be harming your baby in any way, shape, or form by having them go through sleep training. We've done a lot of research with several universities around sleep training, and lots of people have done a lot of research around sleep training. There are no negative impacts of sleep training longer term. The only impacts seem to be positive. So positive in terms of how well the baby sleeps, how long the baby sleeps, and the mum's risk of postpartum depression seems to be reduced as well. So there's a lot of benefits to having a baby who can sleep these longer stretches at nighttime and is capable of self-soothing. And to Sarah's point, it really is helpful for for their learning during the day, for them to be able to self-regulate as well. Okay, let me go to another question. Okay, Marlene is asking, my 3-month-old does 30 to 50-minute naps during the day, and when we time it, it's on the lower end of the range for total sleep. Is there a way to help him string together more cycles during his nap session, or is this pretty much normal? This is so normal and so great, Marlene, honestly. truly, you're doing an amazing job. And I want you to know that the range of normal is so wide that this actually sounds amazing to me. So I wouldn't say that this feels like it's on the low range of normal. I want to just make sure that we're giving your baby the opportunity to sleep when they need to. So I would be making sure that we're not keeping them awake for too long between naps. But I think if you're giving them, regular opportunities to nap throughout the day, I don't know what their wake windows are like, but typically at this age, we see that first wake window of the day might be an hour and a half. It might be more like an hour. And then as the day goes on, the wake windows tend to get a little bit longer. So the last wake window of the day might be closer to 2.5 hours. But I would just keep an eye on it, and just make sure that they're, going down for a nap fairly regularly. But he or she is doing great. Okay, what else have we got there, Sarah? Okay, we have another question down here. Sorry, I'm going back and forth to the questions.
Covered a lot already.
Okay, we have. Um, okay, but also too, I just want to look, and I know a lot of people have got young babies here, and their sleep really can be all over the place in those first couple of months. And I don't want you to think that I am suggesting that your 2-month-old should be on a very regular schedule throughout the day. Your baby is the chance of your baby being on a regular schedule at 2 months is very close to zero. They may sleep for 15 minutes, they may sleep for 2.5 hours, and there can be no rhyme or reason as to which they decide to do. But the only thing that I would suggest would be trying to be feeding them as regularly as we can. So try and get their feeding schedule to be fairly regular, and their sleep schedule will hopefully follow. The sleep will take a little bit longer, but if you can be fairly consistent about feeding them, every 2 to 3 hours throughout the day, you will gradually get to a point where they're starting to do these sort of longer naps and longer stretches between feeds, and then start to have these consolidated stretches at night. And what we typically see is the first stretch of the night starts to consolidate first. We start to see that your baby may do like a 4-hour stretch or a 5-hour stretch or even a 6-hour stretch, which can feel amazing. And then a lot of people expect that they will do another 5-hour stretch or a 6-hour stretch, and a lot of babies don't. So very often we'll see that they do this long, 5-hour stretch at the beginning of the night, but subsequent stretches are, 2.5 to 3 hours, which is really, really normal. So don't beat yourselves up if your baby is not doing these 2 really long stretches. It may just be that there's going to be one long stretch for a while, and they will that stretch will gradually get longer, and the subsequent stretches will gradually get longer. But you're all doing an amazing job, truly. And it's so heartening to me, Sarah. We do a lot of research together. And when parents are participating in our research studies and giving us, consent to share their sleep metrics, not any sleep video, but just their sleep metrics with researchers, that it just makes me so proud seeing how beautifully all these babies are sleeping. Our babies sleep really, really well. And I'm just so proud of all of our parents, who really understand that sleep is as important to their babies as nutrition and exercise. And that is that really is part of our ethos, and that we really want parents to understand that, focusing on sleep health can just have this multitude of benefits longer term, for their babies, not just for their sleep, but also for their development. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit to that, Sarah, about how important sleep is, longer term.
Sure. So this isn't my work specifically, but just other researchers have found that that getting um, quality sleep as young as the first year
Mhm.
is related to all kinds of other developmental outcomes, even a couple of years later. So it's been tested every which way, but standardized cognitive tests or academic performance in kindergarten. um, it's I don't think that the researchers would argue that those are a direct link, but I think it's an indication of setting creating a healthy routines.
Mhm.
And so all of that over the years is established is a sign of other routines that are beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
I see another question in the Q&A. How do you suggest putting babies down for naps? My 2-month-old will sometimes sleep longer in her crib in a dark nursery and sometimes prefers the bassinet in the living room where there is more light. So I would say in general, look, your baby is still very, very young and is likely to sleep well, at random times and in random places, and very often there's no rhyme or reason as to why they're sleeping well in one space or another. But that said, we do know that longer term, we would love your baby to be in a dark space for sleep. We know that having a very dark space can really help their sleep longer term. It's going to help take away any stimulation. We want your baby going into the crib, seeing that it's dark, knowing that it's time to sleep, and then transitioning to sleep. And that being in a bright room with lots of stimulating things around can make that a little bit harder. That said, at this age, 2 months, like I said, they're probably going to be sleeping anywhere and everywhere. But it can't hurt to be starting that habit, and getting into the habit of putting your baby down in that darker room. So that's what I would suggest for that. Okay, what else have we got? Oh, this is a great question. Any recommendations for parents who wake at different times due to jobs? Our son's sleep starts at night the same time, and our son is 8 months. So look, I think it's really difficult when parents have different, non-traditional work schedules. Um, my husband always gets up for work at 4:30 in the morning, which he has done for 20 years, and that was something that we had to deal with as a family with our three boys. But what I would say in general is that I want you to understand that your baby has a need for sleep. And I want you to respect that your baby has a need for sleep. So I would not invite you to my house for dinner at 3 o'clock in the morning, because I understand that you have a need for sleep. And similarly, I wouldn't expect your baby to be awake until 11 p.m. so that they could see a parent when I know that they have a need to sleep. So when we're thinking about choosing a sort of a bedtime and a wake up time for your baby or for your family, I'd like to recommend that if you can see, if the parent who has the trickier schedule, if that parent can see the baby at one end of the day, that would be amazing. You may not be able to see the baby at both ends of the day, and that may be something that you have to live with for a short period of time. But if you can plan your day so that the parent can see the baby at one end of the day, I think that would be amazing. But I know that it's tricky to be having a baby in your room and a husband getting up to leave to get to work very early, which is why I think actually a white noise machine is great for that instance as well. When one or both parents are having to get up for work earlier than the baby is getting up, that white noise machine can be an absolute lifesaver, because it's going to drown out, whether even if the baby is in your room or if the baby is in their nursery, it's really going to help drown out those outside noises of you getting dressed and ready for work in the morning. So I cannot recommend a white noise machine highly enough. Okay, so we have another question here. Oh, from Marlene again. Do babies tend to cap out in terms of how much total breast milk they can ingest during the day? Just wanted to make sure we're feeding enough throughout the day so he sleeps better. That's a really great question. Look, I think babies are very good at getting what they need from the breast. That said, if you're worried at all, I sometimes recommend topping off with a bottle after a breastfeed if you're worried that your baby's not getting enough during the day. So if you offer perhaps an ounce or 2 ounces after a feed, and if they're not interested in it and they don't take it, you're clearly producing enough, and they're getting enough. But if they're guzzling down that 2 ounces, it could be a sign that they're not getting enough during the day, and they may need to have a little bit more. So I would recommend trying that for a couple of the feeds during the day. I don't care if it's breast milk or formula that you're offering them, whatever you're able to. But we want to, if we're wanting to think about having them starting to go longer stretches at nighttime, we may want to sort of gradually, naturally increase the amount of food that they're getting during the day. And so offering that, top off bottle after a couple of feeds can help towards that. Okay, we have another question. As we're winding down for night sleep, we have a dim light on. Should we turn this red light off when baby falls asleep, or should we keep it on throughout the night? Great question. I want the light off, please. So I really do not want a baby sleeping with a light at nighttime. So I love a night light for that, for that bedtime routine. I think is fantastic. But once the baby transitions into bed, we want to turn that light off. There's a lot of research out there showing the detrimental effects of babies sleeping with light. So we want to make sure that they're in that dark space as much as possible. Anything else? Okay, there we go. I have some friends who keep their bassinet in their walk-in closet so the baby doesn't get disturbed when the dad has to get up really early to go to work. I did that too. So we definitely did that. I actually took all of the clothes out of the walk-in closet just so there was nothing else in there, but I put a fan in there. And yeah, my child was in a closet for 2 years. Yes. So, and they were fine. But it was great. It was a lifesaver for us. We were in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had 2 babies at the time, and it was a way to have the baby in a separate space that wasn't disturbed by my husband at 4:30 in the morning, because that is not when I wanted to get up. So, any other questions or anything else? Oh, this is a good question. Any suggestions for how to increase breast milk supply? Have heard it's essentially supply and demand, but I still feel I'm producing a fair amount less than my baby needs, and frequently am supplementing with formula. This is a really great question. Look, there's a couple of things. I don't want you to go crazy, but there's a couple of things that you can do. You can make sure that you're drinking enough water and that you're eating well. But I always recommend doing a pump before you go to bed at night and a pump after that first feed of the morning. If you can do those 2 pumpings, you can actually breastfeed for as long as you want, and your baby can go through the night without a feed and you can still maintain your supply. I don't want you to be starting to pump after every feed. Look, some people may recommend that. I don't love it. I think you can go a little bit crazy on pumping, and I don't want you to go crazy over pumping. But if you do those 2 pumpings, that should go part of the way to increasing your supply a little bit. And if you have to supplement with formula, you supplement with formula. I don't want anyone to think that there's anything wrong with formula, and you've done an amazing job to be breastfeeding for this long. And if your baby needs more calories, we can top them up with formula. And there is literally nothing wrong with a baby having formula. So please don't feel any any guilt or shame about, having your baby drink formula. We want that baby to be fed. So, okay. We have another couple of questions. Okay, my 4.5-month-old has learned how to go to sleep on their own, which is great. I do notice that he has been waking up around 5:36. Any tips to get him to go closer to 7? Okay, so a couple of things. One, he could be genuinely hungry at waking up at 5:30 or 6, and you've got a couple of options. Honestly, my preference is that you feed him quickly and you pop him back down, and treat it very much as a night feed. 5:30 is not the beginning of the day. That is a night feed, and we get him straight back down, and he will hopefully then go through until 7 or 7:30. The other thing that you could think about is trying to get a few more calories into him during the day. So topping off with, maybe just sort of ramping up his ounces for each feed during the day if you can. Making sure that if you're breastfeeding, making sure that you're, draining one breast, offering the second. And if you're bottle feeding, maybe just gradually, naturally ramping up the amount that he's getting for each feed. The other thing that I want you to remember is that between 4 and 6 months, your baby is going to be drinking more milk than they will ever drink in their life. And I want you to be ready for that ramp up in intake. He may just be hungry, and so it could be that, he was sleeping perfectly at, 3.5 months and was going beautifully through the night. Now he just needs a little bit more. So I think more than likely it's a hunger thing, I would say, at that age. Look, if he was waking up multiple times in those early hours of the morning, there could be other things going on. But if it's just that he's waking up then, I think he's probably hungry and I would feed him. But let's make sure that he's not falling asleep at the breast or the bottle when you're feeding him, and then just popping him straight back down so that that night is lengthened. Okay, we have we have one more question. What are some tips to wean my 1-year-old off breast milk? I exclusively feed him from the breast, but I want to transition him off. So that's a really great question. And there's lots of ways to, to transition from breastfeeding. Look, at that age, he doesn't actually need that much milk. So he's going to be getting most of his calories from his solid feedings anyway. You're probably feeding him a couple of times a day. If you're feeding him more than a couple, like if you're feeding him 3 times a day, perhaps you can think about transitioning to feeding him, twice a day, or think about starting to offer a bottle, or you can even start to offer a sippy cup at that age as well. So, but we don't want to, I don't love cutting back, I don't love weaning too quickly. It can be very painful for mom and hard for baby. So I would definitely think about trying to do it gradually if you can. Okay, we've got a few more questions here. I'm sorry, Sarah. Could you try to dream feed before you go to bed? So this is a really, really great question, and I'm happy to take it, Sarah, if you're okay with that. And if people don't know, a dream feed is offering your baby a feed while they're still asleep before you go to bed, in the hopes that it will lengthen their night, and that you will then be able to sleep a little bit longer. We did some research on dream feeding a couple of years ago, and we saw that, in fact, babies who are dream fed do sleep a little bit longer at nighttime. It was about 6 minutes. So I don't know that that's worth it for a lot of families. If you think that's worth it for you, then that's great. And also too, look, there are some babies who respond to dream feeding really well, who, they will take that dream feed and then they will, go another sort of 4 or 5 hours until they're waking again. A lot of babies just don't. A lot of babies have that dream feed at 10:30, 11, and then they're awake again at 1, ready to feed again, regardless of whether they've had that feed at 10 or 10:30. So I think it's worth experimenting with. I certainly wouldn't be, and I'm talking about in the early months, honestly, I certainly wouldn't be recommending a dream feed after around 6 months, because that is the time where I really want to think about cutting out all nighttime feeds. So I certainly, your baby's not going to be hungry at 10 o'clock. And I don't want your baby to be in the habit of needing that feed, which is the next thing that we can get to. We can have a, an 11-month-old who's still needing that dream feed, which we don't want. We want to think about sort of, cutting out those nighttime calories. But it's up to you. Experiment with it. For some families it works, for others it doesn't. But definitely try it in those early months if it's something that you think will work for you. Okay, what are the signs that your baby is ready for sleep training? It's a really great question. So it's really more, honestly, it's more about the parents being ready for sleep training than it is the baby, I think. I think you need to be ready for sleep training. If assuming your baby was born on time, is healthy, I recommend starting sleep training somewhere between 4 and 6 months. I'm not at all saying that at 4 months your baby should or could be going through the night without a feed. But I'm saying that I would love you to start giving your baby the opportunity to fall asleep by themselves at the beginning of the night, because when they can do that, they are going to start sleeping through the night fairly quickly. And that really is what sort of sleep training really is all about. But if you're seeing that your baby is waking up many times during the night, they're not necessarily hungry, but they're frustrated, that's usually a sign that they're ready to be sleep trained. But it really comes down to, the parents being ready to sleep train and take that leave. Okay. Oh, this is a good question. At night, I'm able to transition baby from a rocking chair feed to the crib, but during the day, my baby wakes up as soon as I try to get up from the chair. Any advice for transitioning and lulling back to a nap? So I honestly would love you to stop the rocking chair. So if we could, I would actually love you to start at nighttime, having the baby, feeding the baby, not rocking them, and then not sort of, rocking them before they go to sleep, and then transitioning them into the crib. And then once you can do it at nighttime, it should be easier to do it for the nap. Okay, one more question. I noticed that when I do a dream feed, our baby, 3.5 months old, wakes up only once in the middle of the night, but on nights we happen to skip it, she wakes up twice in the night. Is there something else going on? No. So look, so this is a perfect example of a dream feed working for a family, right? So that feed before you go to bed means that you don't have to get up 2 hours later to feed is perfect. It's a perfect scenario. And for some families that works beautifully. I'm just saying for a lot of families it doesn't. So just experiment with dream feeding. If it works for you and that is your scenario, that you're feeding the baby at 10:30 or 11, and it means that they're then only waking up once during the night, have at it. I think it's amazing. So I think that's a really great scenario. Okay. So we have just got a couple more minutes, and actually we only got another minute, so we should probably think about wrapping up. We are going to be announcing our winner of our sound and light machine, and our winner is Rachel Sullivan. So congratulations, Rachel. You've won a sound and light machine, and someone from Nanit will be in touch with you. So congrats. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you all, and I'm so happy to have Dr. Berger here. I hope that it was helpful, and it was just so lovely to be answering all your questions. Any last comments, Sarah?
No, just thank you for letting me speak to parents.
Amazing.
It was great fun.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Alrighty. Thanks, everyone. Good luck.